Welcome to AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. Educate. Celebrate. Connect. Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Welcome to AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection for another exciting and very informative show today. And the name of the show is Playwright Marcelino Quiñonez, El Che. Playwright Marcelino Quiñonez, El Che. And I think many of you know Marcelino, and he wrote a play and then he acted that play. So we're going to get into that. We also have another guest with us, and I'm going to introduce them in just a bit. But before I do, I want to remind you that this shows and all of our radio shows are Facebook Live. So if you do Facebook, I am asking you, as I always do, ask you to help us by finding our page, AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection, following our page and recommending it or sharing it with friends and families. We are addressing very important issues on this platform. And our goals, our objectives are to educate on relevant issues, celebrate Latino accomplishments, and connect communities. So now let me introduce our two guests today, and they are Marcelino Quiñonez. He is ASU Director of Educational Outreach, correct? Mm-hmm. And then I also have Guillermo Reyes. He's an ASU professor and also a playwright director. Let me go one by one. How about you, Marcelino? Welcome to our show, and thank you so very much for saying yes to our invitation, and it's always a pleasure to have you.
David, thank you for having me on your show, and thank you to AARP for the wonderful work that you all do in celebrating and connecting our community. So, on my part, it's a terrific pleasure and a joy to be here, and I look forward to the conversation, especially with my good friend and mentor and teacher at one point, Guillermo Reyes.
It's interesting because sometimes the actors get all the credit, right? But I mean, you probably have gotten a lot of credit, but we didn't know that it was Guillermo Reyes who was very involved in the writing. So before anything, Guillermo, thank you so very much and welcome. Thank you for joining our show today.
Yes, thank you for having me. ARP is in the back of my mind right now, so I'm getting up there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so let me ask you to help us know a little bit more about who you are. As I said earlier, one of the objectives of this platform is to really celebrate Latino accomplishments, and there are so many, and regrettably, not a lot of, they're not showcased as much. So let me just spend a few minutes, perhaps the remainder of this segment, starting with you, Marcelino. Tell us a little bit about who you are, where were you born,
Sure.
How you came to the States, you went to the university, you wrote plays. I mean, you're all over the place. Now you work for ASUs. Just if you can take a couple minutes to let us know a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I was born in Durango, Mexico. And then when I was 5 years old, my mother, Ofelia, got tired of waiting for my dad, who was already living in the States. And so we ended up migrating to San Jose, California, where I would spend the next 8 years. And then when I was 13 years old, we moved here to Phoenix, Arizona. I attended the Roosevelt School District, South Mountain High School, where I discovered theater and in their drama magnet. Eventually, I would become the first person in my family to graduate high school, attend the university, where I met Guillermo as an undergrad student. It took me 5 years to earn my degree. And following my degree, where I would become very, very involved in the theater and where I would write the first edition of El Che, following that, I became a high school English teacher. Mm-hmm. After 4 years of doing that in South Phoenix at Espiritu NFL Yet, where I was able to empower 78% of my sophomores to pass the Arizona Ames reading and writing exam.
Amazing.
It was a great accomplishment, a whole team effort. I would go back to ASU, this time to work on my master's. And then since earning my master's, I've worked in a lot of places having to do with arts, culture, and education. most recently the director of youth outreach at St. Vincent de Paul, where I also managed the One at a Time scholarship program.
Right.
And for the last year at ASU as their director of educational outreach and partnerships. So if you take a look at my journey, it all has to do with arts. It all has to do with culture. It all has to do with education. And the reason why I've done that is because those are the things that have really allowed me to grow as an individual. And if it's worked for me, I think it's got a good chance of working for others.
How old were you when you came to this country?
I was 5.
5. I'm sure you remember at least vaguely when you were in Mexico. You said Durango, right?
Durango, huh?
Can you just imagine the little boy that was there and the man that you are today? It's an amazing journey.
You know
isn't
what? Last year, it was my cousin Cassandra's quinceañera, and we went back to San Jose, California. And every time I go back, I always ask my mom or my dad or my siblings, let's go back to the apartment that we grew up in. There's a picture that I took of my dad, sort of just looking out, and the apartment that we grew up in is behind him. It's been a remarkable journey. It's very humbling, and I could only I could only feel a sense of pride and a sense of gratitude
because
and
you
humility.
did not come from a rich family.
Oh no!
Maybe on the contrary, correct? Working
My
parents.
father still works as a waiter. He's been doing that for a number of years. I've been a waiter in my life too, and my mother is a lunch lady, and she also cleans homes and offices.
Right.
So
Amazing.
there hasn't been a lot of privilege.
Yeah, and before we go to the break, I want to also allow time for Guillermo. Guillermo, how about you? Where are you from? How you came to the States, etc. If you can share a little bit with us.
Sure. My family's from Chile, from Santiago, Chile. And we came way back in the early 70s. And I was 10 years old at the time. So I learned English, from scratch because I didn't speak English. And it was also a working class family. My mother was a nanny, but she also did maintenance and housekeeping, all those type of things in the Maryland area. Eventually, we made our way to Los Angeles, and that's where I got my degree, bachelor's from UCLA.
You went to UCLA. I grew up in East Los Angeles, by the way.
Yeah.
So those names, UCLA, USC, are very, very
West,
well known in those areas,
it
right?
was West LA, yeah.
Right.
But then I got my master's from UC San Diego in theater. Eventually, ASU hired me to teach here, teach in the playwriting area. And also in the year 2000, I and a couple of friends, Trino Sandoval and Daniel Enrique Perez, founded Teatro Bravo. We did plays in English and in Spanish. Now, we decided to do, this was in the spring of 2004, we decided to do a Spanish translation of Romeo y Julieta, the translation by Pablo Neruda.
Right.
And of course, we needed a fabulous young actor to play Romeo. So who did we find? It was Marcelino.
He did that play in Romeo.
Yes.
Wow.
He played Romeo, and Nubia Enriquez, who's also an actress in the community, played Julieta.
Nubia Enriquez, I think I know her.
Right, yeah, she's very well known, and she's very active in the community. Can you believe that was 15 years ago when we did that play?
Exactly.
But I still remember one of the lines. Si yo profano con mi mano indigna este santuario, mi castigo es este. Mis labios peregrinos se disponen a borrar el pecado con un beso. That's the Pablo Neruda translation of Romeo and Juliet.
I can't believe this.
Yeah, it was.
He directed it.
Yeah, it was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience. And so, I mean, that's the type of thing that I've been trying to do here in the Valley is to do Latino plays, but also sometimes translations of famous plays like Romeo y Julieta. And then it allows for younger talents to thrive. And that's how eventually Marcelino wrote his own play. He did it in my class. I'll take credit. And then he did a one-man show on El Che.
Right.
And then that play became a full-length play that was no longer a one-man show, but with multiple characters, which he.
That is amazing. You know, it's about opportunities. I believe. I remember when I was a kid in Mexico. I was born in Mexico in the state of Nayarit. Came to the United States when I was 12 years old, and I used to do comedia.
Okay.
Sainetes. They used to call them sainetes en comedia, and I was doing that. But obviously, the opportunities were not there as they are here. So who knows? Maybe I could have been an actor. You know?
Right. You could have written your own play. We could have been, on the opposite side.
You know, the audio on our Facebook Live started a little bit late. We are going to have to go on a short break. But this show is Playwright Marcelino Quiñonez El Che. Topic again, Playwright Marcelino Quiñonez El Che. Obviously, Marcelino acted this play, and Guillermo helped in the writing of it. So we're going to get into all those details. Stay with us. This is AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. We'll be right back. Thank you. Thank you for staying with us. This is AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. The topic today is Playwright Marcelino Quiñonez, El Che. We are, he is one of our guests, Marcelino Quiñonez, as well as Guillermo Reyes. Guillermo Reyes is an ASU professor in the playwright. He's a playwright director, actually. I want to ask you the first question because, theater, it's a little bit of a challenge, I think, it's not too popular. Can you tell me if that's changing, if theater, playwriting, acting in the Latino community, is it improving? Because I personally probably have watched no more than 3, maybe between 3 and 5 plays in my life. So help us understand where that is with Latinos in this country primarily.
Well, obviously, we need Latino representation in the arts. But yes, there is Latino theater. The thing about it is that, when we hear sometimes about these Broadway shows, very expensive Broadway shows, they tend to be more elite and they tend to leave out communities, not just Latinos, but all working class communities. But that's why we also have a history of Latino theater that was basically started by Luis Valdez, Teatro Campesino, where he would go out with actors and he would do plays for striking workers, for Cesar Chavez. And that, I think, started an entire history of Latino theater that is aimed at communities, not just in California, but throughout the various barrios across the country that appeal to working class communities, so that the teatro goes to the people. And I think that is one way to do theater that is not necessarily elite, and that addresses the issues, various different issues. So you can do issues that are sometimes very political, but you can also do plays like we said, Romeo y Julieta, for instance, in Spanish, where we did it at the Phoenix College, and it did not cost a lot of money. It was not a Broadway-style show.
So the Broadway-style show, I mean, again, I'm not a, informed, and so do they do more like an entertainment as opposed to getting a message out, if you know what I mean?
I think that's a fair assessment. I think there's a message in every aspect of theater, in every production, but for the most part, Broadway theater shows, you're paying to see the perfect timing, you're paying to see the perfect light glare, you're paying to see the perfect note hit time after time, and there's a beauty to that, and there's something to be respected. I think where Guillermo and I come into the mix in this conversation is theater is possible anywhere, and theater is possible here in Arizona. I would be saying everything that I'm about to say if you were not sitting here, but what Guillermo and Trino and Enrique did in 2000 with getting Teatro Bravo started here in Arizona is a tremendous accomplishment, because when we talk about representation, it's important for young people, of all working class young people, to see themselves on that stage. We started this interview by asking about our journeys and how we got to this very seat. And in telling that journey, hopefully what will happen is somebody else will say, oh, I can do that too. I'm from a South American country. Oh, I'm from Mexico. I'm from Nayarit. Oh, and now they're doing that. And so when young people, when people of all ages go into the theater and they watch those stories play out before them, theater is much more than entertainment. Theater is representation of life on stage. And it's important that those representations be impactful, be educational, be inspiring, so that other people can begin to imagine, can begin to dream of their lives beyond their current circumstances.
And let me bring a point here that I think it's worth bringing it forth. Many of us, and I count myself as one of them, my parents, your parents, that came from other countries, from Latin America, Mexico. It was the not the educated, for the most part.
Sure.
So the image that they have in this country of Mexico and Latin America is not the real one, because you go to Latin America, South America, Mexico, there is theater, there is everything, there's literature like crazy. So so the beginning of theater here in this side of the border, in this side of the world, is very significant. So now, am I correct in saying that perhaps the beginning of theater was more with the message of protest, perhaps?
Well, I would say in the case of someone like Luis Valdez, definitely, because that was part of the strikes, the grape strikes of California back in the 60s.
With Cesar Chavez?
With
Yes.
Cesar Chavez,
Okay.
right. He worked directly with Cesar Chavez. So that was very much a theater of protest. But it developed from there, into different types of theater. Entertainment as well.
Absolutely.
I think he did Zoot Zoot, which was his big hit.
Right,
right?
and
Right.
Zoot Suit goes to Broadway, but
right.
again, Luis Valdez establishes himself as an artist, as a playwright, as a result of the strikes in California, as a way to galvanize the farm workers to continue their march, and folks start to notice him, and then eventually he arrives in New York and creates one of the most iconic characters in El Pachuco. But from there, Hollywood picks him up, works on La
And they
Bamba.
made the movie.
Made La Bamba.
Right,
Well, he made Zoot Zoot, the film, too.
Right.
Made La Bamba was his
Right.
big hit.
Right. So I guess what we're saying is that trajectory might start off as protest and civic engagement and so forth, but eventually, just like anything else, we begin to see that there are different textures
Right.
to a particular culture. And so when we're not struggling for equal rights or for equal wages, guess what? We want to sing, we want to dance, we want to
Right.
celebrate our food.
Right.
Because, we just had here in Phoenix American Mariachi.
Right.
And then James Garcia did Raúl Castro.
Right.
You did El Che
did El
Guevara,
Che,
right?
right.
And then you just handed me a book, Guillermo, Latino Heritage on Stage, dramatizing heroes and legends.
That's right.
So I see, this is an amazing book. It's got what?
7?
Lots of
They're all
plays. It's let's see, Joe Arpaio meets La Virgen de Guadalupe, Stella Pope Duarte, Lloronas, Carlos Manuel, The Sins of Sor Juana, Karen Zacarias, Ramona, Guillermo Reyes. That's you. You wrote that one.
That's right, yes.
That's great. Frida, Ruben, what is it? Amavisca Marúa, El Che, our very own Marcelino Quiñonez, and Manzi, the Adventures of Young Cesar Chavez, Jose Cruz Gonzalez.
Right.
So there's a lot of theater going on, but again, it seems like many of us might not be that aware. So I'm very glad that we're having this show to really be better informed that this is happening. So let me ask another question, particularly to you, because you write, but you said that you do not act, right? You did a little bit, but not. That's okay. But then on your end, you write and you act. So what attracted you to the arts, to acting, Marcelino?
So this is gonna sound like a joke, but it's honest. Growing up, I wanted to be a police officer, but I was afraid of somehow getting harmed. And then I saw Will Smith and Martin Lawrence in Bad Boys, and I said, "Wait a sec, I can be a cop as much as I want to without getting hurt." And then in high school, at South Mountain High School, I started to study theater in their drama magnet, and then I go on to discover Shakespeare, and I go on to discover Al Pacino. And then all of a sudden, I start at ASU, and I'm told that I have the ability to write my own stories. And so all of those stories that I thought I could only watch or that I could only relate to, all of a sudden I'm told that I could write my own story. And so for all those young people that were inspired by being immigrants, that were inspired by poetry, that were inspired by creating a sense of justice in their communities. All of a sudden, I could do that, and that's a tremendous power and a tremendous privilege. But that's how it got started. I think the my longing now is to tell these stories as a way to empower people, so that when they go on the theater and they sit there, they do exactly what you were talking about at the beginning, David, which is, wow, there is more than the stereotype. There is more than the negative misrepresentations of people.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, go ahead, Guillermo.
I was just going to add that in the book itself, though, so that's a collection of plays, most of which were done at Teatro Bravo, and they are about the heritage and cultural heroes and icons of Latino culture, like Cesar Chavez, like Elche, like La Llorona's legend, La Llorona. And I think that's just to bring up the various, images of Latino culture in the Southwest, particularly for audiences that may not always know them. Because I teach a class in Latino theater, and a lot of my students don't know Cesar Chavez. I mean, they're not, even some Latinos have to be told these type of stories. So a lot of it is educational in that sense, but it's also representational. People need to see a variety of our heroes, so to speak, and our legends.
Yeah. I went to American Mariachi, and I literally was shedding my tears.
Right.
It's a very emotional story, and the mariachi music, it's just an unbelievable. Before we go to the next break, I want to ask you, what is the process of creating a play? Where is it born? Who initiates it? What's the process? And then once you have the idea, you write it, and then what? You get actors? I mean, just kind of take us through that process.
Well, I'll say briefly, and then he can talk specifically about his. I think every writer, has some sort of dream, ganas maybe, to tell a story.
Right.
And whatever that story is, you suddenly think, okay, what do I do? What do I say? And so you start writing dialogue, perhaps. You start writing the highlight of the story, I assume with a... let's say Romeo and Julieta, it's the love story, how they meet and all of that. And so you start telling the story, and you find, you make your way through from beginning, middle, and end, and then you have your actors, right? You have to gather your actors to read through the play and make sure that it's sound. And if it's a new play, you're going to do rewrites over and over again, probably, to get it just right. And then hopefully then you'll move on to a production. But it starts off with something very simple, like even just handwriting of dialogue.
Right.
And then you make your way to the end and get your actors and directors together.
That's a pretty intense undertaking, no?
It's
Marcelino?
very laborious.
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into it, and it's very vulnerable, because all of a sudden you start to share your work, and a conversation between a husband and a wife, or that you wrote, and then all of a sudden you share it in front of a group, and you hear, no one talks like that, or why would she respond that way, or it's a very vulnerable undertaking, but it's also a very beautiful one, because after rewrites, after various feedback back and forth, to be able to say that you have something that you created that can be shared time and again afterwards, that's also very thrilling.
Right. Now, these careers are not easy ones, right? They're not easy in terms of making a living out of them, correct?
Right. Most people, most writers, I think, have that struggle. Writing a novel, it's the same thing. It's difficult to sell a novel and for it to become a bestseller novel. Writers do a variety of things. Some of them direct, some of them act, some of them teach, and then do other things, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a difficult career, but it's, like he said, it's beautiful once you feel, accomplished having done it.
Do you think you're a better writer or a better actor?
I think
I think I know the answer. But go
I
ahead.
think I'm a better actor.
Right. Have you ever gotten an offering to maybe pursue an acting career because you're staying here and doing other things in addition to acting?
No, I'm often told, why didn't you go to LA and why didn't you try to do that? It was really during my undergrad years at ASU that I learned the power of theater, and I really started to separate myself away from this idea of just doing the arts and doing theater for the sake of being famous and for the sake of appearing in magazines or in television shows. I really look at art as a tool to transform, to educate, to connect people.
Got it.
And so with that in mind, I don't really need to go out there and try to pursue a movie career. I also have a family. I have, I have a beautiful 10-year-old daughter. So, and I have a whole community here in Phoenix
Right.
that I love and that I want to help. And so,
Yeah.
I don't need to go chasing a real,
I hear you. I think community is very important, family is very important to you as opposed to fame and money. Stay with us. We're going to have to take our second break. You're listening to AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. The show today is called Playwright Marcelino Quiñonez, El Che. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Thank you. Thank you for staying with us. This is AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. Very important show today. Playwright Marcelino Quiñonez, El Che. And I want to remind you again that this show is on Facebook Live. And if you do Facebook, do find the page, AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. Follow our page and help us. Help us reach more people. We are doing our very best to accomplish three things. That is, educate on relevant issues, celebrate Latino accomplishments, and connect communities. We are talking with Marcelino Quiñonez and Guillermo Reyes. They both have a passion and have done lots of writing and acting. We are focusing today on El Che. So let's kind of enter into or begin addressing this matter. Why El Che? Now, let me ask you, Marcelino, was this your first play that you wrote? Okay. Why El Che? What is it that you're trying to convey, and why did that this character attracted you?
Sure. So in 2006, very similar to today, there was a large need for comprehensive immigration reform here in this country. And hundreds upon thousands of people would walk out onto the streets in marches. There were several throughout the country, and there were two here in Arizona organized by El Señor Roberto Reveles and his group. Mm-hmm. And at one of those marches, I was a student then at ASU, and so rather than take part in the march as someone who marched, I decided to volunteer. And I was right there on 7th Avenue and Washington, and I was handing out water to all the marchers, and I was picking up trash. I was volunteering. And I saw a lot of people with Che Guevara's image on their T-shirts. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know who that man was. I just remember having seen that shirt a lot of times. And so at that moment, I told myself, I'm not going to wear that T-shirt unless I know who that individual is. Mm. And I have a pretty obsessive personality. And so I ended up going and picking up every single Che Guevara book that I could find, every documentary that I could find. And I would spend hours just watching this, learning about this man. The book that had the greatest influence on me is by John Lee Anderson. It's called Che. And so I would read this book time and again. And then as it so happened, I was getting ready to graduate from ASU, but I needed to do one final project. Mm. And at 22, 23, I didn't think that my story was much different from other immigrants. So what I decided to do was I wanted to take this myth and this myth of Che, who's either seen as a villain or either seen as a hero, and really present a human on stage as a way to deconstruct the myth and really say, no, here we have a human being who was a father, who was a husband, who was a student, who was a soldier, who was sometimes blinded by his idealism. And so, as it so happened, I'm a student at Arizona State University. Guillermo Reyes is one of my professors, specifically a playwriting professor. And so the story of El Che really starts with the desire to deconstruct that myth, and the first origins of it start in Guillermo's class.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually what would happen is it would become a one-person show. I would do it in 2007, 2009. And then in
So
2000...
you're narrating...
It was a series of monologues.
Okay,
So
monologues.
it's Che Guevara talking to the young soldiers.
Okay.
It's Che Guevara talking to Fidel and asking him why he read the letter in 1965 after he left. So it's a series of monologues. And then in 2011, I got a phone call from this man, and he said, Marcelino, we are getting ready to write, to create an anthology of plays that Teatro Bravo has produced. We would like to include Che, but we would like to include it as a full-length play as opposed to a one-person show. And so I ended up having to go back to all of my notes and back to the actual play that I had written and converting that play into a full-length show by including other characters. So no longer is
You
Che.
had to do that?
I had to do that.
Wow.
I had to do that. And again, this is just in my brain. It's in my brain and on my computer and
Amazing.
and lots of coffee.
Yeah.
And then eventually, in 2015, this book, Latino Heritage on Stage, Dramatizing Heroes and Legends, edited by Daniel Enrique Perez, would come out, and my play was included in this anthology. I would go on to meet Benny Morel, who would become my producer and a wonderful, dear personal friend of mine. And so together we would put on that show here in Arizona in August of 2016, and it was really well received.
3 years ago, basically.
3 years ago. It was really, really well received. And I'll tell you, I think what for me brings this whole thing back full circle. There's a moment in the play that I wrote where Che has two wives. And so the audience meets his first wife, Hilda, and we see him interacting with her and we see him teasing her. And then Che goes to Cuba, and in Cuba, he meets a woman by the name of Aleida March. And he falls in love with her. And he starts to romanticize her and he starts to court her. We did the show and we had a student run the Thursday before we opened. And Kerry Lengo, who's the theater critic for the Republic, asked me if he could attend that show because he wasn't able to go through the run. And I said, absolutely, come on by. And we had students from the Tolleson high school district there. And as they're watching the show, we get to the part where Che starts to court Aleida.
Right.
And at one part, he says to her, I'm a married man, but I think you and I could create a beautiful story together here in Cuba. And all of the students in the audience responded by saying, ooh, ah, oh, right? And Kerry Lengo went, took to social media that day, and he said, if you've ever doubted the power of theater, I wish you had been with me tonight at this particular play because, and forget that it's my play, but what he was really alluding to was this idea that the students connected with what was going on stage, and they were able to interrogate that. And the article goes on to say that they forgot about their social media, they forgot about their phones, because they were connected with what was going on that stage. And so that's happened to me countless times. You shared your experience with American Mariachi.
Right.
I've seen countless plays by Guillermo where I'm like, wow, that's what it's about.
Yeah, Guillermo, when you heard that he wanted to do El Che, what was your first reaction?
Well, I wasn't sure. It was his first place. It was very ambitious. So, I always caution young writers. You have to start slowly, and make sure you
maybe La Llorona first.
That one,
No, because I also didn't know about the issues of communism and how they're dealt with here in Arizona. All those controversial issues. So I don't know. I was a little skeptical in that sense. Obviously, I wanted him to write what he needed to write. So, but I think it's important for a young writer to persevere in what he envisions, and I think that's why it felt like a very passionate project for him, and we invited him to do it first at Teatro Bravo, and that was very important. He did it as a one-man show, as he said, and then eventually became this even more ambitious project that involves other actors. I just think that, this is one of the things that I was trying to do with Teatro Bravo, is to encourage a lot of young Latino writers or Latina writers to also express themselves and come up with ideas and plays that express who they are and what they're feeling and what they're thinking. And also to express them at our level here in Phoenix, because we don't have enough Latino writers here.
Right.
And so I thought that this was important to pursue, and I'm glad that he's been able to do that. Certainly James Garcia has been doing that with his plays. Marcelino has written other plays as well.
Right.
And I just think that that's important to spur young writers to tell their story.
Yeah, if you don't mind helping us here. So let's say that Latinos who are listening to this show, they want to know what Latinos are doing in the realm of arts, in the realm of entertainment. What's happening? Where can they go? I mean, is it sporadic here and there? Because I know mainstream, what we call mainstream, is easy. You see it on TV all the time. But how about Latinos? I mean, where can people find more art efforts or plays or things like that? And I don't mean just in Arizona. I mean, is there like a website or a movement of some sort?
Well, there's something that I saw a long time ago. It had a picture of Vincent van Gogh, who I've also done a play about, and it said, "Don't buy my artwork when I'm dead. Buy it now."
Okay.
And so I think when you hear your friends who have an inclination towards writing, or who meet other artists, when you get invited to their shows, by all means, do your best to attend. And then I think just like anything else in the world, once you start to taste a little bit of it, you start to discover the other people that are involved in it, right? So Guillermo and I are friends. We're both artists. We both like theater. We both learn from it. Well, we're friends. And then we have other friends. And I know that James Garcia is going to be here next week, and he'll share about his play. But you've got people like Israel Jimenez, who's a wonderful, talented actor. You've got people like Ricky Araiza, who's also very talented and also a product of ASU. Nubia Enriquez, whom we've mentioned. And so I think that I would be remiss if I didn't mention Greta, right? So we've got Greta Skelly. We've got all of these pockets of artists that are actively trying to do their work. And so it's important that once we hear about them, we support them. And not just when it comes to mainstream theater, but whenever an artist tells you, hey, this production's taking place, by all means, do your best. And strangely enough, social media is a wonderful outlet.
So you
to
basically
get the word
would have
out.
to look for them individually. There's not like an entity where people.
Well, there's Teatro Bravo.
Well, Teatro Bravo it is headed now by Ricky Araiza, and right now they're not as active as we used to be.
Historically, right.
But I think if you look at the internet, at our Facebooks and so forth, we're always doing something. There's always something going on. I mean, he gave a good example. Both Israel Jimenez and Greta Skelly, they are both starring right now in The Heights, which is being done at the Mesa Arts Center. And so that's a really wonderful example of how we have a Broadway play that's being done here by local artists. And Marcos Vos is directing.
Right, Marcos Vos is directing. And then also I think what's important is you just attended American Mariachi by the largest theater company here in Arizona Theater Company. What's important about that is that when these large professional theater companies do present stories that are not of the traditional canon, and by that I mean the most well-known plays, but they do include a Jose Cruz Gonzalez production or a Guillermo Reyes, that we do our best as a community to go and support them. And there are countless opportunities, whether it be the rush before an hour before the show starts, you can get half price tickets or whatnot. So it's a matter of us being aware and sharing that information with others.
Well, let me tell you, at ASU in the fall, I'm directing Kiss of the Spider Woman, El Beso de la Mujer Araña in Spanish. And I say that in Spanish because we're doing it in both languages.
Okay.
So we're doing performances in English and in Spanish. And that's going to be an interesting challenge because we've never done that before.
Right.
I mean, we've done plays about Latinos before, but we've never done a bilingual production. So at ASU, we're very active in doing that, in putting on plays that are Latino themed, and we're going to do that in the fall. I'll be directing.
So basically, Latino efforts in these realms are being picked up, if for lack of a better term, by mainstream, correct? That's basically what's happening? It's not like you're building your own thing. You're basically being, like you mentioned, the Arizona, what is it? The
Arizona Theater Company.
Theater Company. So they're basically...
Yes and no. I mean, yes, some of them are do occasionally pick up a Latino play. I mean, like Arizona Theater Company, Mesa Arts Center, and so forth. But we're still doing, the groundwork. I think, we're still doing plays in smaller venues that are original plays. I think we're
on a smaller
ourselves.
scale, would you say?
Well, because sometimes a new play needs to be done at a smaller
Got it,
scale.
got it.
A new play in particular.
Got it.
And James is doing his plays at Lunch Time Theater, and whenever Marcelino just did Dear Senator, and he can tell you about that, and I did Bad Hombres at the Space 55. So we're keeping it.
Let's talk about those two, and then a little bit more about El Che when we return. We're going to be taking our last break. Stay with us. This is AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. We'll be right back. Thank you. Thank you for staying with us. This is AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. Playwright Marcelino Quiñonez, El Che is the topic today. Marcelino Quiñonez is one of our guests, and Guillermo Reyes. Let's come back to you, Guillermo, if you don't mind. You said that you wrote Bad Hombres. Obviously, if a play is written, then it's acted eventually, correct?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you came up with the idea and how that went?
Well, no, Bad Hombres, it's a series of stories played by one actor, and the actor was Israel Jimenez, whom we mentioned will be starring in The Heights. He's also going to be in The Beso de la Mujer Araña, by the way, because he's going to do it in Spanish.
He's a very sought out.
Yeah, exactly. And he can act in both languages. So, yeah, he played a series of Latino immigrants in Bad Hombres, and they are dealing with the current issues of immigration and deportation and so forth. And he also played transgender characters and gay characters. So it's a combination of various different issues. And so, and it was a comedy, by the way. It was very funny. And it's dealing with, very contemporary issues, I think, but in a very humorous way. And by playing all these characters, I think he had a lot of fun, and the audience had a lot of fun watching him transform from one character to the other.
What has been the I guess the most satisfying play that you've written, or any aspect of your career in the arts?
Gosh, I don't know. Well, okay, let's go all the way back to LA, because I did a play called Man on the Verge of a Hispanic Breakdown, similar one-man show, by the way, and that went all the way to New York. It was done off Broadway, so that got a lot of good reviews, and was published, and so it still gets done, across the country. Sometimes I can't even see it because it's being done in some other city, and so that play, has been done across the country. So I feel like it's gotten my name out there, and it's a fun show. And
Right.
I think it's given me that type of satisfaction. Yeah.
Is a writer, or there is a difference about play, a playwright versus books, or I mean, is there a big difference? Can you share a little bit about that?
Well, a playwright writes the plays on stage, and then, of course, a screenwriter writes them for film. But they do get published, too. So we are writers,
Okay.
It's just that sometimes plays don't always get published. It just depends on the play. But we're definitely writers, like all those other writers.
Were you born a writer, and basically, or what was the main thing that made you a writer?
I didn't
A lot
know,
of reading?
Yeah, a lot of reading. But, I didn't know it was also genetic because
Okay.
I didn't know my father very well.
Yeah.
But when I started to write, people said, "Oh, yeah, that's what your father used to do." And so I thought, "Oh, shoot!" So it was an instinct
Got it.
because I didn't know that that's what he did.
But you still have to do your homework. I mean, just because you have it in your genes doesn't mean that it's going to come automatic.
Right,
You still have to
Still
read
have to
a
do
lot,
the hard
right?
work.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, thank you, Guillermo. And Marcelino, you said that you also did a play on Dear Senator?
Dear Senator, so last October, Grant Woods, who served as Arizona Attorney General from 1991 through 1999, him and I wrote a play called Dear Senator. It was directed by La Doctora Cristina Marin, who's a theater professor at Phoenix College. And so we wrote the play, and then him and I started in it. He played a senator a very conservative Republican senator by the name of Jeffrey. And I played a young man who was an immigrant, who was a Democrat, who was very liberal. His name was Miguel. And so the whole idea behind the play is that you've got two individuals from completely polarizing opposite political ideologies. And given the current political climate that we have, we wanted to show how these two individuals who would very rarely agree on anything having to do with policy could come together to learn from each other. And in that sense, create a meaningful dialogue that results in something positive for our community. And so the message there was, just because you don't agree with someone doesn't mean that you can't learn from them and you can't work with them. And so that was done at the Tempe Center for the Arts. Grant was awesome, was amazing. Benny Morel again produced that play. And I had a wonderful time on stage as an actor. It'd been about 2 years since I'd been on the stage since then, but we had a good run, and there was a good message for the play.
Go ahead.
Can I just add one thing? Since I saw it, and I've seen his earlier work, I really was very pleasantly surprised. I mean, not that I wasn't expecting it to be good, but I'm just saying pleasantly surprised in that I sense that there was a tremendous growth in the artistry because it's a very well written play, and I thought the way that it handled politics was very sophisticated. It's like it was not like a denunciation of people. It was actually a very sophisticated play about politics, and I don't always see that.
Right. Kind of a balanced perspective.
Yeah,
you would say.
But rich and textured, and I
Right.
just thought that was
You before we run out of time, Marcelino, I know James Garcia is going to join us next week, and he has a play starting, if I'm not mistaken, this weekend, right? Would you mind telling the audience about that play?
Absolutely. And James Garcia is one of my my theater godfathers. So I always like talking about him. His play is called Miranda's Curse. It's a new play by James E. Garcia and Ana Flores, and it will be playing at the Herberger Theater Center, which is on Van Buren and 3rd Street. It's part of a program called Lunchtime Theater, and so what will happen is it'll start next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the mornings, and then the grand opening of the show is next Monday at the Herberger Theater Center at 7 o'clock, I believe.
And online, people can find information where?
I will post the information for Miranda's Curse, a play by James E. Garcia and Ana Flores, on the conversation that we have now. So on that Facebook Live video that we have going, I will post that information so that people can find out about it.
And then James Garcia obviously is on Facebook. You can find him as James Garcia, and then Vanguardia Arizona. Vanguardia Arizona, obviously he's going to be posting a lot. And by the way, just please know that next week we're going to have him join us in a show such as this one, and he's going to be talking about Raul Castro, actually. He did a play on Raúl, is it the Raúl H, right?
Raúl H. Castro,
He was the first Mexican American governor of Arizona. There was a play. He did it. I think he wrote it and he acted it. He's going to be talking to us about that, and obviously other plays that he's written. Let me finish the show by I think a very important takeaway of this whole conversation, and let's focus on El Che. We understand that Che Guevara is a controversial figure. If people identify with that spirit, obviously nobody would advocate for revolutions such as the one he engaged in. I think we all would agree.
Right.
How does that spirit of questioning and not going along with the status quo can be implemented, that those attitudes be implemented today?
Well, look, I think for anyone who's seen the show or who reads the play, you walk out of there understanding that here was a man who loved literature. There's a Pablo Neruda poem included in the play specifically because one of Che Guevara's favorite pastimes was to read. The other thing that I think comes across is that he was tireless in his pursuit of what he thought was a fair world. And so I don't get really into the politics of the benefits or the benefits of communism or capitalism. That's not what the play is about. The play is about how an individual can dedicate themselves to their efforts, but in the process can also become blinded by their own idealism and by their own ambitions without really taking a look at what's going on around them. I think we can point to various cases today where people just become blinded by their own sort of idealism without really taking into account that the world is changing, that the world is evolving. I think the final punchline in the play, if you would, is Che Guevara dies in the play.
Okay.
Che Guevara dies in the play. So what happens is we take the audience on a journey of how what I consider his blind idealism led him to a room in Bolivia in 1967 where he was shot. So it's not necessarily attacking or countering capitalism or communism. It's more so showing how every individual can become blinded by their own idealism.
But Latinos have to deal with a lot of stuff, especially these days.
Yes.
What is the best approach for Latinos? How can I can see you, and I guess what I mean is education, information, connection, and being an active in the community. That's the best way to get engaged and to change things. I suppose that's what I want to get to. How do you change things today if not, getting involved in the process, getting involved in education?
And I think that comes across in the play. I think that comes across in the play. There has to be a journey of self-improvement. There has to be a journey of self-learning. And then once you experience that endeavor, then all of a sudden you get to become more involved. You get to become a bigger change agent. But it all starts from within. And I think that the play does that. We see Che, exploring literature. We see Che reciting poetry. We see Che reflecting on the impacts of imperialism, and we see Che talking about what happens when people are defenseless. So it's becoming aware and then galvanizing those around you to create the sort of change that you wish to see in the world, without going to violence.
Right. Final words, Guillermo. If anybody's out there interested in arts, what would you say to them?
Well, obviously, I'm an educator, so I would say education is very important, and finding those outlets wherever you can find them. Obviously, at ASU, we have classes on playwriting and theater, and those are important, but you'll also find them in the community colleges. Our friend and colleague, Christina Marin, teaches at Phoenix College, for instance, and she does a lot of Latino plays, like directing Marcelino's play. So the opportunities are there. You just have to find them. But you should know that they are available here in Phoenix. They are available in Arizona.
They can find them at the ASU website?
Yes. They can find me, Guillermo Reyes, in the School of Film, Dance, and Theater.
Marcelino Quiñonez, very, very thankful that you came today and share your experiences. Guillermo Reyes, the same. Thank you for sharing with our audiences this amazing thing that is the arts. And thank you for listening today. This was AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection, with the topic today, Playwright Marcelino Quiñonez El Che, See you next week.